I'm at the stage in my life where, I've got married, have a couple kids, and like I need to create a trust for my family just in case anything happens to me. I'm getting of the age where I have friends around me who, are having health issues. Some of them have had heart attacks, some of them have had cancer. And so I'm like thinking about this, like I need to make sure that my family's taken care of just in case anything happens to me. And so I wanted to create a trust, and I went through the process with an attorney. And it was like they threw me like stacks and stacks of like homework that I had to fill out. And it was, there was no actual conversation with the attorney. It was like, fill out all this paperwork and then we'll create your trust for you. And I was like, these guys aren't creating my trust manually. They're just like putting it into a system and it's automated already. And I'm like, why do you even need the attorney if I'm not even talking to the attorney? I'm just going in and filling out paperwork and they're creating my trust. I'm like, and I got the bill and it's like a few $1,000s and it's like, it shouldn't be this way.
Who's this? Oh, you're an entrepreneur? Oh, you're a real estate investor? Oh, you're trying to learn from those who did it? Well, come into the lab then. Put your white coat on, gloves on, notepad, and let's build, y'all.
Experiment Nation, in this episode, I have a gentleman who specializes in doing or establishing trust in record time speed. If you know that you've always wanted to have a trust put in place, but you knew that, or at least you anticipated or assumed again, a tedious process, this gentleman helps us how to streamline trust with the company that he founded after working as a VP of sales for an $8 billion company, which he grew the sales team, worked in finance world, then in the tech world, and essentially created a digital systematized way to streamline legal documents for startups. He was able to bring that knowledge into the ecosystem of real estate on a topic that is often overlooked. Having your assets in the right kind of protection, having your assets in a trust. And the only thing that's probably stopping you, if you're listening to this show, because you're very aware and I know you're an action taker, is the process. Because we know that money loves speed. In this episode, you're going to get a kick of how this gentleman is able to allow you to create a trust in record time. I'm talking about he claimed this, not me. You could do this on your phone in the next 5 minutes. You could do it at the back of an Uber. You could literally do it anywhere in record time. And the entire idea is to make sure that you stay ready so that you ain't got to get ready. A lot of people wait way too long till they have kids, till they have X amount in their portfolio, even if they have a trust and they don't have things already established in the trust as they grow their business, as they grow their empire, which then has a significant impact on how they're able to actually save what they've been building their entire life for, because they were just not properly structured. They didn't have a trust in place, or they had a trust in place, but it was not well established. They didn't go back to the past and put things into the trust, and now it's going to probate. And if we know anything about probate, on average, it can take 18 months for things to go through probate, and all the way up to 5 years. And that does not come for free. It comes with a fee, and you can lose all the way up to 10% of what the actual asset is. And it's not even guaranteed that whoever you wrote it to, or whoever you even if you wrote it into a will, that it's going to go to the right person, because when it goes through probate and it's up for a challenge, anything can go post death. So it's really important that even if you're thinking of the 3 things that he talked about that trust do, which one is avoiding probate, number 2 is asset protection, and of course, number 3, privacy, which we know is important for us investors, as we can be targeted and will be targeted as we continue to grow our assets. It's only a matter of time until somebody, again, the lawsuit comes to your door. But if it is in your trust, you're going to be well protected. Plenty more where that came from. Tons of gems. You do not want to miss this one. I'm going to have that one on repeat. But most importantly, will you take action and sign up with GetDynasty.com? Well, if you're not sold, you might be sold by the end of this episode. Check it out and welcome. Real Estate Experiment. What is happening, y'all? Today I have a gentleman here that I'm very excited to have in the lab with us. You know, I have the white lab coat for a reason. Anytime this bad boy comes out, it means we mean business. And you know, I love to have practitioners in the lab with us. And this gentleman is indeed a practitioner himself. And the reason I love that is because there was everything led from one experiment to another to the experiment that he's doing today. This gentleman comes from, again, the finance world, cut his teeth into that, and then came in the tech world, was able to see and create a solution at a startup level, and then take those elements and bring it into his own lab and his own world for his own company to put the bow on everything to then be able to serve investors. And this is a topic that we've never had anyone in the lab, except for maybe one, but it was more tied to asset protection and not very niche. And I'm so glad that we have this gentleman here who has, again, plethora of knowledge when it comes to this specific topic, which we'll get to in a second. But without further ado, I want to welcome Alessandro Chesser from GetDynasty.com here in the lab with us. How's it going, brother?
It's going great. Great to be on the podcast.
It is indeed, man. And like I said, we always have practitioners who come into the lab who are, you know, basically had experience doing the thing. They're not just talking about the thing, they're walking the walk. I want to talk about your walk, your journey. Take me back to, I truly believe business owners are a reflection of their business is a reflection of who they are, right? And I believe businesses are in the business of solving problems. Tell me about your B2C journey, which is very on brand from what I've been talking about this entire week, because we're actually in the B2B model as well, where we actually work with the insurance companies and provide temporary housing for them, which I love B2B. But you actually went from B2B back to B2C, business to consumer. Tell me about the opportunity, why you actually went back to B2C, which some would argue is harder to go through. But why did you go back to that? But help us reverse even engineer how we even got there.
Yeah, I think for me, man, you know, a lot of my background is definitely on the B2B side. My previous job, I ran sales for a startup company that was last valued at $8 billion. I started as the first sales hire and scaled up the team. And so very, very familiar with the B2B motion. But with this particular company, Dynasty, you know, we weren't thinking B2B, B2C. We were thinking, what is the biggest problem we can tackle that can have the biggest impact on Americans? And, you know, we threw a bunch of ideas around, and this idea came up, and it was, you know, it was very good timing because I'm at the stage in my life where, you know, I've got married, have a couple kids, and like I need to create a trust for my family just in case anything happens to me. I'm getting of the age where I have friends around me who, you know, are having health issues. Some of them have had heart attacks. Some of them have had cancer. And so I'm like thinking about this, like I need to make sure that my family's taken care of just in case anything happens to me. And so I wanted to create a trust, and I went through the process with an attorney. And it was like they threw me like stacks and stacks of like homework that I had to fill out. And it was, you know, there was no actual conversation with the attorney. It was like, fill out all this paperwork and then we'll create your trust for you. And I was like, these guys aren't creating my trust manually. They're just like putting it into a system and it's automated already. And I'm like, why do you even need the attorney if I'm not even talking to the attorney? I'm just going in and filling out paperwork and they're creating my trust. I'm like, and you know, I got the bill and it's like a few $1,000s and it's like, it shouldn't be this way. We need to make this, first of all, it needs to be digital because, you know, the output when you go to an attorney is a stack of paper. And like, you have to put your trust, that's your trust, it's a stack of paper. You have to put it in your filing cabinet. And what happens if you lose it? What happens if your house burns down? If you lose it, you don't have a trust anymore. That's your trust. That's the source of truth.
Wow.
And so I was like, it needs to be digital. You should be able to update your trust as easy as you can update your social media profile. Like that's the thought we had from the very beginning. And so we decided to tackle it. And we weren't even thinking, you know, I was like, oh, but it's actually a B2C company. Like, should I do that? And my co-founder was like, no, we're going to chase the biggest problem possible. Don't worry about B2B or B2C. Like we want to make a big impact for the largest amount of Americans as we can.
Wow. And just for context, so there's two things I want to break down. Number one, the reason why I have you here and the reason I'm excited is because you're solving a very focused problem or a gap for investors. And usually the friction point is the speed, and speed follows money. And so anytime there's like, oh, here's the process, you got to fill all this paperwork. That's a reason why, literally we just had someone in our on our platform come talk about private money. Why? Well, because it's so much faster than sending a bunch of forms to your lender, going back and forth. But even that, let's talk about that. That's automated. That is, at least there's forms that you're being followed through, and you're going through a portal, and there's a sequence. What you're talking about is, and I've heard you mention this before, which I think is phenomenal, is that when we talk about, what Carta does as a, and maybe you can fill in any gaps here, but from what I understand, Carta was a company that would essentially streamline any process for any venture, what is it, like a business. They would basically streamline that and digitize legal documents. Is that what they were doing? I think that's what
right.
they did.
That's right. With Carta, we went after the startup market, venture funded companies and venture investors, venture capital. And we took all these. So the startup world used to operate on paper. It was paper stock certificates. And when you got an option grants at a startup company, it was paper, a stack of paper options. When you wanted to exercise your options, you had to fill out a worksheet. And you had to pay for the exercise by writing a check. And so we looked at that in the very beginning. We're like, we need to digitize this entire thing. Like, you can go on to Robinhood and buy Apple shares right now. Like, why can't I go buy Stripe shares in Stripe's a private company. And so we're like, we need to digitize the private markets the same way that the public markets were digitized a couple decades ago. Because it used to be that way in the public stock market too. You used to have paper stock certificates, and then they digitized everything. And so that never happened in the private markets. That's what we did. We just took all these legal, and I think the reason for not wanting to digitize it all those years after the public markets were already digitized, it's like lawyer, there was more custom contracts. It was like, oh, we're going to customize your option package. We're going to customize your financing, your employee hires, your exercise agreements, your repurchase agreements. It was more, law firms, that's what law firms want to do. They want to customize things because that adds value, makes it so you can't just go to any other law firm down the street, which means you're going to pay maximum value. Their job is to make profit, right? To make money. Yeah. And so they want to give you the most sophisticated product possible so you can pay the most amount of money. But that goes the opposite direction of when it comes to, wanting access to trust. And, if somebody just doesn't have a trust today, they shouldn't be forced to pay a few $1,000s and see an attorney. If they just want a simple trust that helps their family avoid probate court, or they just want to put their home in it, it shouldn't be, the way we look at it, shouldn't cost them anything. It should be free. We can create the trust for them for free. The fill in the blank worksheet, we turned that into software and it was done. It doesn't cost us anything to fill in the blank trust for a customer. Why should we charge them for it? And that's when right away we're like, we need to make this free. Trust creation should be free.
I want to get to the trust part in a second, but before I like I said, the founder is always so super interesting. So you were early into you were early. I think you were in sales, right, at Carta, and you were one of the early adopters. Then you grew a huge team and everything, right? Things were good. It's $1 billion business. I think it was like 8 billion or something like that. Why did you leave? I'm just curious. And the reason I asked this question is because I think there's a lot of folks in this space are either investing on the side in real estate and want to potentially have an exit, or maybe like you, they've been in the sector and then they have this itch that's scratching them. But what was yours? Did you know you were going to leave at some point, or was there something where you woke up one day and you're like, hey man, it's been real, but I want to take my talents to my own venue? What was that transition like?
After being in the same company for 8 years, there's, wanting, having dreams and aspirations of building $100 billion company. And, I think the biggest thing for me, obviously when you're not in charge of the company, you don't have direct control. That can be a very frustrating thing if you don't agree with the strategy. And so there was just a lot of moments where I was not seeing eye to eye with my manager, the CEO of Carta. I was working with him directly, and just, disagreements. And I just kept thinking I could start my own company and tackle something that might be a lot more personal to me. And so that my point about like solving the biggest problems possible, like Carta solved the problem. Like the mission was done. Like they're a very, very successful company, but there's a cap to like how big of an impact they can make. People that don't have any startup shares are not going to even know who Carta is, right? And Carta is dominant when it comes to like startup shares. If you're a startup investor or you're a startup employee, like very good.
What do you
chance.
mean by startup shares? Could you elaborate on that?
Yeah, when you own stock in a startup company, a pre-IPO company.
Okay, so when you're saying people might not know what Carta is unless they have startup share, are you referring to people externally, or you're saying, just want to make sure I understood what you meant by that?
The people that use Carta are people that have startup stock, right? So when they have instead of having like a paper certificate, stock certificate, now they go on and they log into Carta and they have their.
Got it. You're saying if you're from that world, that's kind of like the very niche, like they dominated that
startup.
that
You have
sector.
you have to be a startup employee or a startup investor, basically.
Then you know what that is, yeah.
Because then you have shares in a startup and you use Carta to look to access your shares. It's like it's like E-Trade.
Yeah.
For private.
That's a really neat niche, because you're saying that these startup companies they're not public, but they've given some equity to their early founding or at least early employees, founding members, etc. I mean, that's how. Yeah, I mean, that's how a lot of these guys came up in Facebook and all that stuff.
That's
right.
Right. That's exactly right. Yeah.
Yeah, they were okay. So that's a very interesting niche. So it makes sense. You took that to where it needed to get to. You were super early. You're a VP of sales there. Then you're like, hold up, there's this dinosaur industry. And it's interesting because it's almost, when you think of trust, you think of government, maybe, right? You think of probate. You can correct me if I'm wrong. So when you think government, you think old, outdated. Not only was the digitizing documents, behind or from private to public sector, you saw that. So that's what Carta took advantage of. But then you're also now seeing it on the real estate side in an area that most people probably don't do, not only because they don't know, because most wealthy have trust, but also because if you do know, which I know that's my people who are listening to this, you probably heard of it, but there's friction, there's a process, it takes time. So you guys find a solution where you streamline that process and make it super easy, which is why I'm geeking out about. But at the same time, you also then take that for the consumer, you speed it up, but then you also digitize it, which you've shared a lot of case studies as to why it's important to digitize it. So before I go there, I want to understand first, for someone who's not familiar, why are trusts even more powerful than a will? Why is it even important to have one? And then I want to talk about how like you guys have been able to streamline this whole operation. Like what is a trust? What kind of trusts are they? Irrevocable versus revocable. Why is it important? And why should everyone, especially an investor who's listening to this, have a trust in place? What are the risks? We love risks, right? Let's measure it. What's the risk?
Yeah, so there are 3 or 4 primary use cases for trust. And so number 1 is to avoid probate court. That's the number 1 use case for a trust, the most common use case. And so that's why trust is better than a will, because wills have to be processed through probate court when you die. If you have a will and you die, your will is going to go through probate court. Probate court is the government process that determines who gets what. And so a judge will literally read your will, and your family members will show up to probate court making claims for your assets. And somebody will say, actually, there's another will that he wrote, but we don't know where it is. It's missing. And it will just stay in probate court forever. Like, people challenge it, and it's very hard to prove anything because like wills are, you don't know if it's the current version of the will. You don't know if it was forged. You have to interpret it. Was it interpreted? What about the thing that they didn't mention in their will? What about that? So there's all these reasons why probate court exists, but it ends up being a massive racket. Like, all the money goes to the lawyers who have to assist people through the probate court process. And so that's why a trust is better than a will, because it avoids probate court. When you die and you have a trust, your assets go directly to your family members. Court does not get involved like it does with the will. So that's number 1, avoid probate. Number 2, the second most common thing that a trust can do for you is asset protection. You mentioned that. You must have had an asset protection attorney on your show.
Yeah.
That's a big one because, trust can protect your assets better than a prenup can. Like if you do a prenup and you get married and you get divorced, a judge, just like a will, a judge is going to look at your prenup when you get divorced and determine if it's fair or not. And if the situation has changed or if it gets misinterpreted, and a judge is going to decide how your assets are going to be divided, regardless of what's in your prenup. The other reason why prenups are full of friction is because you have to basically pre-negotiate your divorce before you even get married. It causes trust issues immediately. Like if you tell your spouse, your fiance that you want to do a prenup, they're like, why? You don't trust me? What's going on? So trusts are much better because if you put your assets in an asset protection trust, it's locked away. Like there's nothing that especially if you do it in a state like Nevada, which has the best asset protection laws in the country, nobody can get into that trust. Even if you file bankruptcy, those assets are safe in the trust. Even if you get sued, those assets are safe. You get divorced, those assets are safe because they're separate from you. You're not controlling them anymore. You have a Nevada trustee who's in charge of them. And so that separation in the relationship between you and your assets gives you bulletproof asset protection. And so that's the second most common thing is asset protection. The third, privacy. As you know, real estate records are public. And so anybody can just, that's if somebody's looking to sue you, the first thing that they do, they go to a lawyer and a lawyer is going to look up your public profile and they're going to find out what real estate you own. And if you own a lot of real estate, they're going to be like, yeah, let's go sue this guy. We're going to get a lot of money. But if they can't find anything that you own in real estate because there's nothing on public records, they're going to be like, I don't want to waste my time going after this guy. He might not own anything at all. But that's what a trust can do for you. It takes your name off of public records. Instead of your name being on the public record, your trustee's name will be on the public record. And so they don't actually know what you own anymore. The fourth thing, and it's the least common, is a trust can help you reduce taxes. That is really only relevant for people who have over $10 billion in assets. And
how
people
much?
who are 10?
10. Was that a B or an M?
10 million.
10 million. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yep. And so, tax reduction it's really about death taxes. And so if you die and you have over the actual limit is $13.9 million. If you have more than $13.9 million, every dollar over that is going to be subject to 40% death tax. The way to avoid that is to put your assets into a trust, and the trust will continue to exist after you die. It never has to settle, and it never has to pay death taxes.
Got it. Experiment Nation, you've heard me talk about how multiple investors across the nation are landing these lucrative midterm rental insurance contracts by making these small tweaks on the branding and marketing side, especially if you're an existing short-term rental operator. There is a quick and easy shift that you can make with the ride guide in place. And because we've launched a 2-day boot camp that not everyone could attend in real time, I've put together a recording where you can get all the materials and all the guides to focus on rebranding either your short-term rental business or your current midterm rental business so that you can actually have the insurance companies reach out to you. And then day 2 is if you want to actually play offense, how you can reach out to them by listing on the right platforms, etc. If you're looking to get this MTR bootcamp so that you can start optimizing and you can start receiving these lucrative contracts that again provide less headaches, less turnovers, unlike the Airbnb space, you can start receiving inquiries today by having the right guide in place. So please go to experimentrealestate.com/MTR bootcamp or click the link in the bio to make sure you get your hands on the midterm rental insurance bootcamp to fast track your way into landing these lucrative insurance contracts the exact same ways multiple investors have taken advantage of this unknown and untapped niche within the midterm rental umbrella. So this is, I don't think most people, know this unless they're in the space and they've been hanging around the folks they should be in. This is why I'm so happy we have you here. What do you think, as you're kind of going across the nation? I think I heard part of the use case is it why are people not doing this? Is it knowledge gap? Is it process driven? Like what is Get Dynasty streamlining today that is what I would call the unique selling point of it? Why is it
Yeah.
is it the time? Is it the access? Is it the finding the right attorney? What is it that you're doing that to help us streamline?
Yeah. So what are we doing? First of all, we make trust creation free. You can go on and do it yourself and create trust for free. Anybody can avoid probate court.
How
So
could you do it for free? That is so fascinating. Like when I heard you say that, I was like, hold on here, hold the phone.
because
I'm a
we
marketer.
yeah.
So I hear that. I'm like, okay, this is customer lifetime value here. So talk to me. How is it free and at what stage? And then what is not free?
Yeah. So we charge you to be the Nevada trustee. We don't charge you to create the trust, but if you want a Nevada trustee, which is people who want asset protection or tax benefits or privacy, we can give that to you, or full service probate avoidance. You want us to move the assets in the trust for you and distribute them when you die. You need a trustee. So we can do that starting at $500 per year.
Very interesting. That's great. So essentially what you've done is, hey, let us get you to, what is the expression? You can take someone to the well, but you can't make him drink it, but you're bringing us there. And now that we're there, while you're already there, here's why you should think about asset protection, because most investors have these LLCs but they don't have the trust, right? Which is again almost what we would say bulletproof. When is it not though? I think I've heard, could a trust get challenged? Because there's always two sides here, right? So share with us like worst case scenario. You've shown us the best case scenario, but is there a case where a trust can get challenged like a will, or is that different?
So a properly drafted asset protection trust with the Nevada trustee is bulletproof. The Nevada law protects those assets. The gray area is if it's real estate assets. Real estate assets, Nevada law can't, if your real estate's in California, Nevada law can't really protect that. Like they can't, regardless of what Nevada law says. But if it's non-real assets, like you shouldn't be putting your properties in asset protection trust. You can, but what people usually do is they put their LLCs in the asset protection trust that own the properties, or they put their stock or their investment accounts or their bank accounts. Those things are virtual. Like California law does not rule over your bank account, especially if it's a Nevada bank account. And so in that instance, it's bulletproof. As long as the trust is properly drafted and there's some criteria that has to be, satisfied. But as long as it's properly drafted, nobody can penetrate that.
Okay, so that's a very interesting distinction that you said, right? You said the asset in itself, let's say you have a home in California, a home in Georgia, or a home in New York, whatever the case might be, you can't necessarily put that into trust, but you can put the entity that either owns the note or the deed into the trust, so that therefore, if someone does come after your property, then it is protected within the trust. Did I miss anything?
Nope, that's right. It's one of the most common assets to put in an asset protection trust is an LLC. It's a holding company.
Okay. So what's the, I've heard, we've had a few folks in our industry. We work with a lot of short-term rental operators. You probably heard of them, like the SDR law guys. They talk about Wyoming LLCs and stuff like that. Is that kind of, when we hear Nevada, what's the whole Wyoming thing? Is that different, or is that, have you heard of that?
No, that's right.
Heard of that?
Yeah. There's 4 states that are at the very top when it comes to trusts. It's Nevada, Delaware, South Dakota, and Wyoming. Those are the 4. They all have different rules. When it comes to taxes, nobody's better in South Dakota, because South Dakota has, they allow for trust to exist forever. It could be 10,000 years, the same trust can live. There's no rule for how long it can live for. In Nevada, it's 365 years. So after 365 years, the trust has to settle, which means it has to pay taxes after it settles. But that's taxes. For taxes, South Dakota is number one. And again, it's only for death taxes. But number two, asset protection, Nevada is number one by far. Nevada is one of the only states that has zero exception creditors, which is nobody can penetrate it. Nobody. Not for child support or spousal support, nothing. Bankruptcy, nothing. As long as it's properly drafted. And so when it comes to asset protection, Nevada's number one. When it comes to taxes, South Dakota's number one. Wyoming and Delaware are pretty good as well, but they're not top states. South Dakota and Nevada are by far like number one and number two.
That's very interesting. So tell me about and this is good to know right here. Tell us about, maybe we've heard the term irrevocable versus revocable. Help us break down. I'm assuming there's multiple trusts out there, but those two, what's the difference between the two? If you were to just as punchy as possible, so someone can walk away from this and be like, okay, now I get it. What's the difference, and is it as confusing as they sound, or is it actually very straightforward?
So, revocable, you can revoke it. Irrevocable, you cannot revoke it. Revoke means you can change it, cancel it, redo it, whatever. So what a revocable trust can do for you is it can help you avoid probate court, and it can make you private. But an irrevocable trust, that gives you asset protection and tax benefits. So that's the distinction right there. Revocable versus irrevocable. If you want asset protection or tax benefits, you have to go irrevocable. If you just need privacy and probate avoidance, revocable is fine.
So couldn't you, correct me if I'm wrong, Al, I was under the impression that a revocable trust becomes irrevocable after death. Is that accurate, or is that inaccurate?
No, that's right. Most of them will become irrevocable after death because they cannot be changed. Once you die, your trust cannot be changed anymore. That's right. The difference is when I talk about asset protection and tax benefits, I'm talking about creating an irrevocable trust to start. So you create a trust, an asset protection trust, or a trust for your children, a trust fund. That's why it protects it, is because you're removing yourself from the control of that trust or the ownership of that trust. You're permanently giving it away to your children or somebody else. And that's what gives it solid asset protection. You don't own it anymore. Whoever you created the irrevocable trust is the actual owner, but you can have some level of control and access to the assets. And that's the gray area where an irrevocable trust is like you're locking it up just like you do when you die. But instead of doing it when you die, you're locking it up while you're alive.
Okay, so very interesting. And does that then mean if I'm locking it up and my children are like 6 years old, they have no business understanding what they should even do with this kind of assets? Is there then a successor trustee in place for an irrevocable trust right away?
Yeah,
there is.
There's a trustee that can handle the trust while you're alive and after you die. And again, that's like our role. We like to be the trustees, so we can handle administration while you're alive and after you die.
Got it. And out of curiosity, if I do want to make a change after I've put in a revocable trust, is there like some kind of addendum or amendment that I can do, or it's locked in? Nope, you said this is what you like. I'm trying to think. Okay, my kids or beneficiaries, it could be kids, it could be family, whoever, have X amount of assets under this trust. Let's say I buy a hotel, and now do I have to create a new trust, or could I amend that trust if it was already revocable? Like, can I place things into that trust, that existing trust, if it's irrevocable?
Yeah, if it's irrevocable, you can put assets in, but if it's a Nevada asset protection trust, you can also take assets out. You shouldn't be looking to just take it out whenever you want. It should be more like a rainy day fund. But if something happens and you need access, that's why Nevada law is favorable, is because it gives you the flexibility to actually take assets back out of the trust if you need them.
That's very interesting.
That's right. The trust is permanent, but the assets are not permanent.
Okay, so you're basically saying for a revocable trust, I know you talk about probate and private are the main benefits of it. But are you saying that a revocable trust could then be dissolved?
An irrevocable trust.
No, a revocable
Yeah,
trust,
it
not
can
an
be dissolved.
irrevocable.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I can wake up one day and be like, you know what, the hell with this trust, and that's what makes it different than the irrevocable one.
That's right. You can revoke it. Exactly. Dissolve it, revoke it. Same thing. Yep.
Interesting. There you go. I just want to make sure we got that. Well,
Yeah.
this is fascinating. Talk to us about the process today, because I really want to understand, right? Like you mentioned it in the beginning, and I wanted to make sure we got to your story for context. Now we have full context. We understand how you work. You understand the gap that you saw in the marketplace based on your experience. We understand also the problem that's at stake here. But just to bring the point home, if I want to do this today, like what is my next step without your firm? And then when you enter your firm, tell us what is the next step, because I think that'll be very helpful for us to. I think everyone who's listening to this will be like, oh yeah, it's one of the things I got to do. It's on my to-do list. Well, it's on your to-do list until it's too late, right? So tell us about the process today, and then the process with GetDynasty.
Yeah. So, the process today, 9 out of 10 times, people are going to go to an attorney and pay a couple $1,000s. It's going to take them, 2 to 4 weeks to get their actual paperwork. And they get their paperwork, and then they have to file it somewhere, like I said, and they have to maintain it. Now, anytime you want to make an update to your trust, you got to go back to that attorney. That attorney's going to charge you another $1,000.
So example, the attorney's not maintaining it?
They will, but they'll charge you every time they want to make it. Every time you need to make an update, like you have a kid, for example. Every time you have a new child, you need to update your trust. You got to, go back and pay the attorney. And we all know how much attorneys cost. So that's what 90% of the market is doing, going to an attorney. 10% of the market goes to these online trust creator companies like LegalZoom and Trust and Will and Rocket Lawyer. And the way that they work is you sign up, you pay $500, and you create a do-it-yourself trust. But again, when you're done, you have to print it out. You have to find your own notary now. You have to sign it in the presence of the notary. You have to file it, and then you have to maintain it and update it on your own. Dynasty, on the other hand, free to create. So we've brought the cost to zero, and we've made it digital, and we've made it simple. You can go do it on your phone right now, getdynasty.com. You could complete it in less than 10 minutes. You don't have to print it out. You can sign it digitally directly on your phone. And so that's the difference: free and fast and easy. For us, we're using it as a upsell lever into us being the trustee.
And then as far as updates go, I know obviously the free can only get you so far. What would that look like on a platform so people understand too? Is okay, well, I got to update it. What's the difference here?
For the updates, we have a Advantage plan that gives you more, gives you Nevada trustee, gives you more features, and it gives you unlimited updates. For the revocable, it's $99 per year.
That's very impressive. And so, I mean, you can see here, speed is the name of the game. Let me ask you, is this, if I have 5 properties, 6 properties, is this for me? If I have 12 properties, if I have 1 property, who is this for and who is this for, not for? When we think of, it sounds like there's multiple tiers, but, I just want to make it very clear as to whoever's listening to this. Does this work if I have half a dozen? Does it work if I have a dozen? Does it work if I have 1? Who does it work for? Yeah,
I would say our off-the-shelf product can work for anybody, like up to 10 million assets. And like anybody above 10 million. Once you start needing to think about death taxes, then we have partners, and we partner with the largest estate planning firms in the country. And so you work with us, we connect you with them, and we can, work together to give you a custom package. But yeah, anybody above 10 usually. So you still come to us, and we'll work with the attorneys and still give you a better, faster experience. But we won't be creating the trust ourselves directly. Like, we think up to 10, the second you need to start thinking about taxes, that's when it gets more complicated than we want to handle ourselves.
Okay, interesting. And just for some context, because I always like to paint a picture, what is the implication there? You saying over 10 million, if it's already in a trust, why could things get complicated with taxes? Or are we saying, even though it's in a trust, there's still tax implications? Like, help us
Yeah.
understand what you mean there.
Yeah. Revocable trusts are still going to be subject to death taxes.
Mhm.
So, like I said, if you have a will, everything is going to be subject to death taxes. The only way to get to mitigate death taxes is to start giving assets away while you're alive to an irrevocable trust. Get them out of your name, give them away to your family members, give them away to your children. That's where it starts to get more complicated because we need to rope in your CPA and maybe your financial advisor. And so we need to coordinate like a plan and figure out like what you want to start getting out of your name and giving to your children. And so for that, we think absolutely it's important to work with an attorney and a CPA probably, and maybe even a
Yeah.
financial advisor.
Okay. So to someone who's listening, I know the biggest thing that for investors at times is, hey, I just closed on this property. It was a primary residence first. I have a mortgage on it. I know I'm told I got to change the LC. I'm afraid I should change it to an LLC because they could call the loan due after it's been converted into an investment property. So I'm sure there could be some friction there. How does your move, when we think of the disruption or lack thereof disruption of bringing in a property into a trust, how does it change how it's recorded at the the county, etc.? Like, how does GetDynasty address that or solve that? Or maybe if someone's thinking of it, how maybe is it not applicable, or maybe it is? Can you help us kind of close that gap?
Yeah. So the two trusts that are going to actually have zero impact on your mortgage and your property taxes is going to be the simple revocable trust or the privacy revocable, like a land trust is what we call it. Those trusts are both revocable. They're guaranteed to have no impact on your mortgage and no impact on your property taxes, meaning that you can do it and your loan's not going to be called due. And you're not going to get your property reassessed either. Once you start doing the irrevocable trust, that's where it starts to be a little bit more complex. And so for asset protection, that trust is a grantor trust. In most counties, you won't have any issues. There will be no issues with property taxes, and there will be no issues with your mortgage. For example, I have my mortgage through Bank of America, and they have no problem with me moving my house into an asset protection trust. Like, they don't have any issue with that at all. But some banks may have issues with it. And then some counties may actually consider that to be transfer of ownership, and they may reassess your property. So when you start thinking about like those type of trusts for real estate specifically, we have like a map of the United States, and we have like where it works and where it doesn't, and we can help you figure it out with your lender. But it's also where we work with our attorney partners to make sure that you're getting the right trust for what you need for where you live. And for some people, it may not make sense to do an asset protection trust for your home. It may make a lot more sense to do more of like a privacy, like land trust. Just get your name off title. That gives you asset protection because nobody knows where you live. They're not going to go after you. But on the other hand, if you're really looking at the asset protection trust, then the ideal structure is actually to put your property into an LLC and then put the LLC into the asset protection trust. That gives you like really good asset protection. But to your point, mortgage company may have issues with you moving into an LLC. And so it's just case by case. It depends on the mortgage company. I have a customer that I spoke to yesterday that has 5 different properties. And so he called his bank for it's 5 different lenders, and 3 out of the 5 are okay with him moving it into an asset protection trust. 2 out of the 5 are not. So it's just case by case.
Yeah. And in that in that case, is that if we think of the workflow, is that the initial step one would have to do if we're working with GetDynasty? Is it that I'm reaching out to obviously I'm the point of contact with my lender, so I have to be the one that reaches out. But is that the first step, or do you go the other way around? Do you go to the one that's basically issued you the mortgage first before you go to the county, or as you go to the county then the mortgage? Like,
yeah, so we can do all this for you, by the way. That's our job, especially if we're looking to be your trustee. Like, this is the type of work you want us to do. You want to make sure that we're going to be solid on going in and doing the research and talking to your mortgage, because we don't need to talk to your mortgage company about you. Like, for example, if your mortgage is with JP Morgan, I don't need to call them up and say, hey, we're thinking about moving Ruben's house into a trust. Can we do it? doesn't matter if it's your house or somebody else's house. I just call JP Morgan and I say, can I move my house with the JP Morgan mortgage into an asset protection trust? And if they let me do it, it doesn't matter if it's your house or my house. It
Got
doesn't
it.
matter.
You can call in as a just seeking information.
That's right. That's right.
Got it. That's very helpful, and that's good to know. I think it's important, having that done for you service, and I think that sounds like the 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 reason why one should involve a professional like you guys to do that as part of the next steps and the different packages that you guys offer. I think it's very good to call out the difference. And I guess it just sounds so efficient, and I just really want to encourage everyone to do this. When you say do this in 5 minutes, which phase of the steps are we talking about? Is it like what happens behind the scenes? So now this is me, my tech side geeking out. How did you streamline it so quickly? Is it because what's that process when you're doing it in an interface? And I know we don't have the opportunity to share that on the screen right now. We'll have to encourage everyone to do it themselves. But what can I expect when you're telling me that I can potentially? Am I creating a trust? Am I creating trust and then starting to put in my assets? Am I putting my social security? What made you streamline this process so quickly where you're able to say, hey, Ruben, you could do this. I've heard you even mention you could do this at the back of an Uber if you wanted to, right? So how did you make it? I'm just so curious. How did you build it?
The really simple free one that you do in less than 5 minutes, that's a revocable trust. It's probate avoidance only. And for a revocable trust, it's really simple. Tell us what you own and tell us who you want it to go to when you die. That's it. There's nothing else. There's nothing else to even think about. And so for that, why shouldn't you be able to do that in less than 5 minutes? Tell us what you own.
What makes it an official trust? Is it the fact that an attorney is going to behind the scenes on the back end has the approval? No, is it the fact that your company has attorney? No. What makes it a trust?
You can make your own trust. Yeah, you can create your own trust. Exactly. Just like a will too.
How is that? Yeah, but I was going to say, how is that different than a will? Because I feel like wills don't hold more weight because they're probably not having gone through the process that a trust goes, and there's been maybe third parties involved. So that was going to be the
notary. Notary is what can usually validate a trust. And so we have a remote notary process. You connect with our remote notary. They're going to ID you. They're going to make sure you who you say you are, and then you're going to sign your trust digitally. But that notary process, that's basically like a witness. It's an official witness. It's making sure that you are intentionally signing your trust.
All right. People don't use notaries for wills?
Not usually. They use witnesses, which are unofficial notaries.
Oh.
Yeah. But regardless, wills have to go through probate court, trust don't. Because trust is a legal entity. A will is not. It's like a trust can own your home. A will cannot.
Wow. That's amazing. Good stuff. So you brought us full circle here, right? Which I really appreciate. This was like a full-blown masterclass. And what I hear, you've been doing this for quite some time now, and you've been able to gain significant traction. What's the goal here? I know there's obviously a big, you said when you left Carta, you had some big goals for yourself. How many investors do you, and let's put it onto the universe, how many investors or you're trying to tap into and get to and that way, if you come back on the show, I always want to say, hey, he said it, it's on the record. And then how can the people, what are the next steps, right? For the people who are listening to this and they're like, okay, this is interesting. I want to be a part of this. So tell us the number first, or tell us what are the big aspirations, what the goal is for the next steps of GetDynasty or Dynasty. I know it's getdynasty.com. And then fill us in. What can we expect if we join?
I think our target market is really 80 million Americans who own a home, who at least own a home. Like that's to us because the home is the most valuable asset to most people. And so we want to help Americans protect their home. Like that's first and foremost. 80 million people. Our traction and where we're at right now, we're helping about 2,500 people a month right now. We'd like that to be 10,000 plus by the end of the year per month. So there's still a lot more to go, obviously, when you're going after 80 million, but.
Love that. Well, listen, what's the next step? I'm sold. I listened to this. I'm like, listen, I want to do this. Where do I find this? Do I go to a website? Do I go to the App Store? What do I do next?
The next thing you do is just go to getdynasty.com. And like I said, do it from your phone, do it from your computer, whatever is convenient to you. It's easy from your phone. You can start it, you can get back to it 5 minutes later. Like it's super simple. It's not like you have to set up time to do it. And if you have any questions, let us know. And there's no excuses for anybody not to do it, even if you don't own any assets at all. Because it's free, it's fast, and once you have your trust, when you buy your first asset, you buy your first home, you open your first bank account, it can go straight into your trust from day one. You can tell them, put it in my trust. Here's the name of my trust, and so it's never going to be unprotected. And so we encourage people like do it early. Don't wait, because the alternative is you wait until you're 50 years old. By that point, you have 10 different properties, you have a bunch of bank accounts, you have some crypto. You have to go retitle every asset one by one into the name of your trust. Most people never get to it because it takes time and work to go do that. And so then they pass away. And even though they created a trust, they didn't protect anything. So their family ends up in probate court. And so the best thing you can do is do it early and do it fast.
Yeah. And probate court could take a while. Like we're talking about months and sometimes years, right?
Yeah, probate court can take 5+ years sometimes. I think on average it's about 18 months, but there definitely are horror stories where it takes a lot longer than 18 months.
Yeah. And usually turns into a battle with family and all that stuff when things could have been streamlined to begin with.
That's right. You could lose up to 10% of your entire estate could get paid in legal fees.
In probate.
Yep.
Crazy. So in other words, stay ready. So you got to get ready. You heard it here. You can go to getdynasty.com. I know I will certainly be tapping in experimentation. I encourage you to do the same. Listen, Al, I want to thank you so much, man, for coming in here and dropping a lot of knowledge. You gave us a whole masterclass. I encourage everyone to re-listen to this. And then most importantly, share it with someone in your life, AKA a lot of us are investors. Share it with a friend. It's really important that we're proactive and not reactive. And you guys know this. It's the name of the game. So with that said, Al, thank you so much for coming in, Lab. And just like that experimentation, we are out.
Experimentation. I believe there are two critical components that will help you achieve your goals very quickly and succeed. Number one, it's information like this that you received on a show, in an episode, and content that you can find on my YouTube channel or anybody's channel. And then there's a community. And the way we've been able to expedite our process, the way people in our community, people that we consult, mastermind members, whoever, they get the information on an episode like this, but then they also have a support, whether it's me guiding them or being guided through a community. There is an opportunity for you listening to be able to expedite your process or even expedite your results that you're seeking by being part of the community. If that is what you're interested in, we at Experiment Nation happen to have a community devoted to helping maximize your occupancy and your profitability altogether, regardless of which market that you are in. And for that reason, you have an opportunity where you can go to experimentrealestate.com/submit if you're looking to work in an environment that can help you prosper faster. Call out any areas that you might not be familiar in, especially the blind spots. That's where a guide comes in hand, and I would be a pleasure and honor to be your guide. But in order to make sure you're a good fit, make sure you go to experimentrealestate.com/submit so that my team can go ahead and take it and see if you're a good fit to join the mastermind and the multiple programs that we have. In addition to that, I'm also now a YouTube partner, which means that I want to give you more access to information, more access to Q&As, more access to the questions that actually come out of our mastermind to help people expedite the process. We've seen people get anywhere from $4,000 to $5,000 to $6,000 to even $7,000 a month net on just one door by applying the strategies that we use by working with corporations and furnished accommodation in a very strategic way. So if you're interested, make sure you also subscribe, because I'm going to have different tiers that's on YouTube now that we've become YouTube partner, to continue to be the bridge to your success in your lab, and your lab means your life, your goals, or wherever you're trying to head. So make sure you also hit the subscribe button on my YouTube channel. That's youtube.com/real estate experiment. We'll be there. You can also look us up at Midterm Rental Insurance Experiment. We will be there. Make sure you hit the subscribe, because that's when you'll know the tiers that are available to you that make sense for you, your marketplace, for your results. Remember, you're only one experiment away. Let's build.